Hello everybody and welcome back to my office. As you can see, we are still in lockdown here in the UK and I'm still stuck indoors doing these talking head videos in the vain hope that by sharing a little bit of my knowledge and experience I can help you with your photography. Believe you me, I would much rather be out in the field sharing my approach, but there may be a tiny chink of light at the end of that particular tunnel, and that is that the UK government has recently announced that they believe we are past the peak of this virus. And so that's got me thinking, what am I going to do once the lockdown restrictions have been eased? But before I get to that, I do just want to see if there are any lessons that I can take away from this period of isolation. Since lockdown started, I have been trying to carry on as normally as I possibly can, but of course there are severe limitations. I haven't been able to get into the Lake District National Park and my photography has been limited to when I've been out exercising. But one of the weird things about photography is that it's only when we start to put limitations in place that we really start to get creative. So for example, when we shoot just with a 50mm prime, or if we only shoot in black and white. And certainly the limitations that have been placed on me as a photographer have started to help me to be a lot more creative in my photography. And so there's an awful lot of lessons that I can take from lockdown. As I've said, I cannot at the moment get into the Lake District National Park. My photography is limited to the area around the village where I live. Now, normally what I would do is I would jump in the car and I would drive for somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes to get to a pre-prepared location. And when I'm there, I'm generally shooting quite wide open vistas. But I cannot do that here. As beautiful as it is, the landscape just isn't like that. But I've also found that there are photographs almost everywhere I look. I just have to look a lot harder. And the more I explore, the more I see. I've always believed that if you have an intimate understanding of your subject, it will help you to take better photographs. And there is no area anywhere that I have a deeper connection with than the area immediately around the village in which I live. And so weirdly, come the end of lockdown, I actually find I want to do more photography around here and not less. Now, if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you will know that most of my photography is pre-planned. I generally know the composition that I'm going to shoot before I get to a location. But during lockdown, I haven't been taking that approach at all. I've simply been taking my camera out with me when I go exercising and photographing whatever I see. And that's helped me to be a lot more creative. Now, obviously going forward, I would like to put a lot more creativity into my photography, but I don't want to change my approach entirely. That would be a bit of a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. However, I do want to look for a lot more opportunity for at least some of my photography to be a lot more spontaneous. Now, another thing that's different about photography in lockdown is that I am shooting a lot more in the evenings, and the reason for that is because I like to get my day's work done before I go out to exercise. Now, normally I would do my photography in the morning. I would say about 99% of my photography is done at sunrise. And that's because I'm a morning person. I do my best work in the morning. But of course, the problem with shooting in the morning at sunrise is that you don't have the time to find a new composition. And that's why I generally plan all of my shoots. But if I were to shoot in the evenings, I think that would give me two advantages. Firstly, I could go to a new location for the first time and I would have the time to explore and look for different compositions and be a lot more spontaneous and not have to plan so much. And the second advantage, I think it would also give me much more freedom to react to the conditions and to pick my compositions accordingly. Another thing that I've been doing differently during lockdown is I've been shooting exclusively handheld. Haven't been using a tripod at all. And that's because I've been using this little camera. It's a Canon M50. And this is the camera that I would normally use to shoot video. The reason I've been using this is because it's mirrorless and it's got an EVF. Now, when I bought my 6D, it was the first time I'd used a camera with live view, and the ability to see in real time the difference that the changes I was making to things like shutter speed were having on the exposure was a game changer for me. But because it was a DSLR and you were essentially looking through the lens, you didn't have that when you were shooting handheld. And so that meant that I ultimately ended up shooting almost exclusively on a tripod. Some people do say that tripods stifle creativity, and whilst I definitely don't believe that myself, it is certainly the case that while I've been shooting handheld, I have been taking a lot more shots. And in fact, some of my favourites are shots that I've taken on the spur of the moment that I probably would have missed if I'd have been shooting on a tripod. Now again, this isn't something that I want to apply to all of my photography, but going forward I definitely want to look for more opportunities to shoot handheld in the future. Now, I typically see myself as a colour photographer. I very, very rarely shoot in black and white. But because my photography has been limited to when I've been out exercising, I haven't always had the best light. That's because I've been going out to exercise when it's nice to exercise, not necessarily when the light is good for photography. And so I've been shooting exclusively in black and white during lockdown. And that's because I find that black and white is a lot more forgiving when the light isn't perfect. Now, I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons why I don't shoot very often in black and white is because I don't see very well in black and white. I haven't trained my eye to look for contrast, differences in tone, texture, shapes, and all the other things that go to make a really good black and white photograph. But one of the advantages of shooting with a mirrorless camera like this one is that I can change the picture style to monochrome. And that means that when I'm looking through the viewfinder, I see the scene in black and white. And that has massively improved the quality of my black and white photography. Now moving forward, again, I don't want to shoot everything in black and white, but I do want to find more opportunities to shoot black and white images. Now, lockdown has even got me questioning my approach to photography at the most basic and fundamental level. See, normally what I do is I go out to take a photograph specifically for photography, but that's not what I'm doing in lockdown. I'm just taking my camera out while I'm going out exercising. Now, I have this theory that the best photographers are the ones that lead the most interesting lives, and all that they're doing is documenting that. Now, I don't want to change my approach to photography entirely, as I've already said, but I do want there to be more scope in my photography for me to actually go out with the intention of doing stuff like climbing a mountain or walking a specific trail, and my photography is just there to document that. And hopefully that's another way of getting more spontaneity and therefore more creativity into my photography. And also it should help with my storytelling. That does rather neatly bring me on to something else I realised during lockdown, and that is that I really like walking. If I don't get out to exercise, I find that my mood sinks and I'm less productive. But of course, if I go out to exercise, I get that little lift and I'm a lot happier. Now, this isn't a revelation as such. I've always known I've enjoyed walking. But since I started my YouTube channel nearly 3 years ago and I've been doing more and more photography, I've been doing less and less walking. And that's probably because I have less time, because I'm much more focused on the photography. But it's also probably something to do with the fact that my bag is so heavy. Carrying all that gear, that big heavy DSLR, all those lenses, that enormous ridiculous tripod, that is really, really heavy, and I think that's been discouraging me from doing too much walking. So again, don't want to change my approach entirely, but I do want to find a lot more scope for me to do a lot more walking in future. Coming towards the end of this video now, but I do want to finish on a lesson that I've learned that is very business orientated. Now, admittedly, lockdown was completely unprecedented. We have never had to experience anything like this in the past. But there is a problem with my business model, and that is that the majority of my income is dependent upon me being able to interact directly with other people, being in the same space at the same time with other photographers. And that means that during lockdown, my income has slipped to almost nothing. And if it wasn't for YouTube and the one-to-one sessions that I do over Skype, I wouldn't have earned a single penny. Now, that is obviously extremely risky for a business. And if something's happened once, then chances are it could happen again. So going forward, I do need to adjust my business model. I do need to find ways of being able to generate at least some income that doesn't involve direct contact with other people. So there you go, those are the most important lessons that I've learned in lockdown. Hopefully I'm going to be able to take those away and they really help me to improve my photography. I hope that these will also have helped you to make improvements to your own photography, and that we're all going to be able to get out again very soon and start putting some of these lessons and what we've learned into practice.